Hello, I'm Tracy Grimshaw. Welcome to this one-hour edition of A Current Affair. It was an historic day in federal parliament when the nation's $130 billion JobKeeper program was tabled. The monster package will subsidise wages and keep people in work. A short time ago, I spoke with Treasurer Josh Frydenberg out of Canberra. Treasurer, thank you for your time. Most of us get toey if we put a 10% deposit down on a car or a house. Tell me, how did it feel as a Treasurer today to present a $130 billion spending package without a squeak of protest?
Well, it's a lot of zeros, 10 in fact, on $130 billion, and it's quite a moment in the history of the Australian Parliament because we've reached across the political divide to pass legislation that is effectively going to save millions of Australian jobs. I mean, no one could have predicted this global pandemic, and no one could foresee the severe economic impact that it would have on lives and livelihoods. And so today's measure, I think, is really important in not just providing a psychological boost to the nation, but a practical material boost with this level of financial support.
Australians are quite used to political parties tearing both yourselves and each other apart. Do we need to get used to this new spirit of cooperation?
Well, this is a Team Australia moment, and whether you're the government or the opposition, whether you're federal or whether you're state, whether you're in the business community or the not-for-profit sector, everyone has a role to play, and everyone's interests are aligned, namely to keep Australians in jobs and to keep Australian businesses in business and to ensure the safety and the good health of all Australians.
The Prime Minister keeps saying that we will look different on the other side of this. I'd like you to paint me a picture, or paint us a picture of that, because we all want to know how this is going to change things. Are businesses going to be smaller? Are taxes going to be higher? Are we, for example, going to incentivise a return to local manufacturing after the faults in supply lines that this crisis has highlighted?
Well, I think that's going to be a genuine conversation, not just here in Australia, but internationally, about the impact that a major economic crisis such as this one has on those global supply chains and the level of self-sufficiency nations need to have in certain areas. Now, we're self-sufficient when it comes to agriculture. We've obviously got manufacturing here in Australia in some areas, but not in others. We can't be expected to build or to manufacture everything here in Australia. It just wouldn't make economic sense to do so. But I do believe we'll need to reassess those global supply chains and what it means to this country at times of crises.
So has this been a wake-up call in that sense?
I think it's a global wake-up call. I mean, the pain and suffering that has been caused by this coronavirus has been immense. And while the past few weeks have been tough, I fear that the weeks ahead will be even tougher. And that's why the Prime Minister has prepared the nation for at least 6 months with respect to the struggle ahead.
You mentioned the 6 months, and obviously the Prime Minister has talked about 6 months, but the Prime Minister also said the other day that these economic measures were finite. He was quite definitive about that. He said beyond which they can't be sustained. You must have a sense of the time frame. You, of all people, would know how much we can afford.
Well, the legislation that we've been passing through the Parliament with respect to the 3 separate economic passages have sunset clause on them, and what that means is they come to an end after 6 months. Now, of course, we'll continue to assess the areas of need, but what we don't want is to be spending money for a day longer than we have to, and that's the reality of it. Today's JobKeeper package is a major call on the public purse. At $130 billion, Tracy, the country's never seen anything of this scale and scope. But it is necessary because of the huge economic impact of the coronavirus.
So, given that we are not going to have a vaccine in 6 months, and at this stage we don't have a cure or any really viable, effective treatment, so that probably won't happen in 6 months, can you see a scenario where we have to look at other measures, for example, building a protective wall around the most vulnerable people in our community and waking the economy up because we can't afford to keep going on like this?
Well, we'll be guided by the medical advice, as you would expect us to do, and that's certainly been the case to date, and I think that's served the nation well. What we have is one of the highest rates of testing in the world and one of the lowest mortality rates in the world, and we're starting to see that curve flatten out. But we'll continue to speak to the Chief Medical Officer at both the federal and at the state level. The National Cabinet is working well, giving the Australian people the confidence that decisions are being made after consultation, and that will be very helpful in plotting the pathway out of this crisis.
It seems, though, that the tom-toms are starting to beat in terms of easing restrictions and waking up activity. The New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian today was talking about reviewing restrictions on a monthly basis. Is that something that you're in favour of?
Well, restrictions, just as financial incentives and initiatives, are never set and forget. We've got to continue to reassess them against the best available evidence. But my view is that the health restrictions will be here for some time yet, and that's because the threat is real. And the reason why we've started to see a flattening out of that curve is because we've put in place the quarantine, the isolation, the contact tracing of people who have come into contact with coronavirus victims. This is really important as part of the medical solution, the medical answer to what is a really challenging problem.
It is a juggling act for which it would appear there's no clear exit path.
Well, neither you or I are going to solve for the coronavirus, Tracy. It's going to be a smart medical researcher, a doctor, a scientist who's working in a lab day and night on that vaccine. Let's hope they find it sooner than later. I'm confident that they will. Exactly when, we just don't know, but I'm confident that they will find that vaccine in due course.
Fingers crossed. Thanks very much for your time.
Good to be with you.